She was just trying to finish her shift before the rain hit. A set of crystal wine glasses, marked fragile, bounced in the back of her delivery bag as she coasted down the side streets of Edison, New Jersey. Mira Torres had taken a shortcut through Westmore Road, barely paved, no lights, trees crowding the shoulders like they were hiding something. It was a dumb move, but she was behind schedule and her scooter was already sputtering like it needed a miracle to make it home. Then she heard it. A baby crying. Not a sleepy whimper or a hungry fuss, this was sharp, panicked. A sound that cut through engine noise, through instinct. She hit the brakes. The scooter jerked to a stop. Her mind screamed, "Go! Keep riding!" But her feet had already touched the ground. The crying was coming from somewhere off the road, behind a thicket of brush where a faint white glow headlights bounced against the trees. Mira crept forward, every cell in her body humming with the wrongness of it all. Then she saw them. Two men in black tactical clothing, ski masks over their faces, one of them holding a baby, maybe 6 months old, wrapped in a light blue blanket. The other yanked open the side door of a black SUV with speed and muscle memory. They were professionals. "Shut that thing up," one of them snapped, shaking the baby hard enough that Mira's gut twisted. "Just get in," the other growled. "We're late already." The baby wailed louder. Mira's heart beat so fast she thought it might break her ribs. No plan. No backup. No logic. She moved. In a blur, she grabbed the first thing she could, her delivery bag, and hurled it like a brick at the nearest man's head. He grunted, stumbled back. Glass shattered. The baby slipped from his grasp for just a second. It was enough. She lunged forward, yanked the infant into her arms, and ran. Mira didn't know the baby she saved belonged to Cesio Fallaci, the man whose name lived in courtroom whispers and blood-stained headlines. She only knew that someone had to stop this from happening. The air reeked of diesel and wet leaves. Her boots thudded against the damp ground as she ran, baby pressed to her chest, breath tearing from her lungs. Behind her, tires squealed. Voices swore. But before they could reach her, before the screaming could swallow her whole, another car arrived. Black. Sleek. Silent. And the man who stepped out looked like death in designer clothing. Before we continue, like this video and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more exciting stories that you won't want to miss. The man who stepped out of the black car moved like he'd already decided how this night would end. He wore a long black coat that brushed his knees, a rose gold dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, and no tie, just a thin chain that glinted under the streetlight. His jaw was carved sharp enough to draw blood, but it was the scar that Mira couldn't stop staring at, a jagged line above his left eyebrow like someone had once tried and failed to kill him. He didn't blink. Didn't hesitate. Cesio Fallaci. Two more men emerged from the car behind him, guns raised but not yet fired. The two masked kidnappers froze, one with his hands lifted slightly, the other backing toward the SUV door. Mira had ducked behind a road barrier, the baby in her arms now sniffling, hiccuping between sobs. Her lungs burned. Her legs shook. "Drop the weapons," Cesio said, his voice cold and final. One of the kidnappers bolted. He didn't get far. A shot cracked through the air like thunder, and the man collapsed in the dirt with a scream, alive, but done fighting. The second kidnapper dropped to his knees and tossed his weapon onto the pavement, hands high. Cesio didn't even flinch. His eyes were already on Mira. She tried to stand, failed, then tried again, cradling the child tighter. The world spun in slow motion. Mira's back hit the concrete barrier again, her knuckles white around the baby's blanket. One of Cesio's men approached the restrained kidnapper and placed a boot between his shoulders, pressing down. Another took out his phone, snapping photos of the man's face, his clothes, his tattoos. Cesio had moved closer now, his steps silent on the asphalt. He stopped 3 feet in front of Mira. The baby whimpered, tiny fists balled near his face. Mira's breath caught as Cesio knelt down, slowly, like a wild animal approaching something wounded. His dark eyes, impossibly still, flicked to the infant, then back to her. Up close, he smelled faintly of smoke and expensive cologne. Mira's voice cracked. "Who are you?" Cesio didn't answer right away. He reached out and Mira instinctively flinched. Instead of taking the baby, he gently brushed a dirt smudge from the boy's cheek. The baby, Alessio, stopped crying. His tiny hand curled around Cesio's outstretched finger like it knew him. "My son," Cesio said quietly. Mira's eyes widened. She began, but words vanished. Her knees gave out, and she slid to the ground, legs sprawled, still holding Alessio against her chest. "I didn't know. I just saw. I couldn't let them." Cesio's face softened by a fraction, barely noticeable if she hadn't been watching so closely. "You didn't have to," he said. "And yet you did." The third man, who'd stayed silent this whole time, tall, broad, with streaks of silver in his hair, stepped forward and spoke in Italian. Cesio responded in clipped, icy phrases. Mira didn't understand a word, but the message was clear. The failed kidnapping wasn't random. This was planned. The baby squirmed again. Mira rocked gently, whispering, it's okay, you're safe." Cesio watched her, something unreadable crossing his face. He held out his arms. Mira hesitated, but eventually handed Alessio to him. The change was immediate. Cesio cradled the baby like it was the most natural thing in the world. The man's shoulders relaxed, just slightly. His hand rested over the back of Alessio's head, protective, certain. He murmured something in Italian again, low, soothing, like a lullaby only a few would ever hear. Mira suddenly felt like she was intruding on something sacred. "You're the one who saved him," Cesio finally said, glancing back at her. She nodded once, still not trusting her voice. He handed the baby off to the silver-haired man. "Take him to the car. Get Rossi on standby." The man obeyed without question. As soon as Alessio was out of Cesio's arms, the chill returned to his posture. He turned back to Mira. "You're hurt," he said. "I'm fine." "You're shaking." "I'm fine," she repeated. Her voice cracked on the last syllable. Cesio tilted his head slightly, then crouched again so he was at eye level. "You have no idea what you just stepped into." Mira's lip trembled. "I don't want to step into anything. He was crying. I couldn't walk away." Cesio nodded once, like he understood. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Mira." "Mira Torres," Cesio said, confirming. Not asking. She blinked. How do you know that?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stood and gestured to the man beside him. "Get her to the car. Make sure she's okay." Mira's panic flared. "No. I don't want. You need protection now. I want to go home." Cesio stared at her for a long time. "They'll come after you," he said flatly. "Not just for what you did. For what you saw. You were a loose thread in their plan. And people like that don't leave threads hanging." "I didn't see anything." Her voice trembled. "Just them. The van. The baby. That's enough. I don't want anything from you." Mira's fists clenched. "I want my scooter and my shift pay and to forget this happened." Cesio didn't smile. But something in his expression flickered, like amusement that never quite reached his mouth. "You saved my son." "I didn't know." "But you did." The weight of that moment pressed down on her. Cesio stepped closer again, leaned in, voice low. "There are people who would have filmed it. Who would have turned and walked away. You didn't. That matters. I'm not looking for a reward." "Good," he said. "Because this isn't about reward. It's about survival." One of his men approached and handed Mira her shattered delivery bag. The wine glasses inside were completely destroyed. Mira didn't even blink. She just stared at the cracked leather strap, the blood on her sleeve she hadn't noticed, and the faint warmth still clinging to where Alessio had been held. "Take her home," Cesio told the man. "Stay close." Mira opened her mouth to protest, but the glare Cesio gave her silenced her instantly. Then, to the man with the silver hair, he added something quieter, just for him. "Find out everything about her. And keep her alive. No matter what it costs." Mira Torres woke up to the sound of her phone vibrating so hard it nearly fell off the nightstand. She groaned, half asleep, reaching for it with one arm still tangled in a worn blanket. 5 missed calls. 10 text messages. The screen wouldn't stop lighting up, buzzing like a wasp trapped in a jar. She rubbed her eyes, still sore from last night's panic, her body aching in places she hadn't even realized she'd bruised. The baby, Alessio, was gone, safe now, taken by the man in the coat with the scar. She had made it home somehow, dropped off by one of his men in a black SUV that didn't ask questions. The memory was already starting to feel unreal, like something she imagined in a fever dream. But then she saw the messages. "Oh my God, is that you?" Mira turned on the news. The baby. It's everywhere. Her stomach turned to ice. With shaking hands, she opened her browser and tapped into the news feed. The top story hit her like a punch to the chest. Delivery girl saves kidnapped baby in dramatic late-night rescue. Footage released. Below the headline was a blurry screenshot of her, mid-run, arms wrapped around the baby, mouth open in panic. The caption read, "Unidentified woman thwarts armed abduction." "No," she whispered, clutching the phone tighter. She scrolled further, heart pounding harder with each swipe. Channel 7. WNEX. Even TMZ. One headline was worse than the last. Hooded heroes. Mystery woman battles kidnappers alone. CCTV hero or Mafia bait. The internet reacts to baby rescue drama. There were hashtags. Hashtags with her face. Her blood ran cold. She got up too fast, stumbled into the cramped kitchenette of the apartment she shared with her grandmother. Her reflection in the microwave door looked awful, matted hair, dark circles under both eyes, dirt still caked around her collarbone. A bruise had started blooming along her jaw where someone must have grabbed her during the scuffle. She looked like someone in a war documentary. Not a pizza delivery girl from Edison. There was a soft knock on her bedroom door. "Mira," her grandmother's voice came gently through the wood. "Why is there a van outside? Are you okay?" Mira turned, dread unfurling in her chest like smoke. She peeked through the curtains, heart in her throat. 2 news vans were parked across the street, satellite dishes raised like antennae seeking a signal. One reporter stood directly in front of their building entrance, hair slicked back, eyes locked on the door. Another was waving toward a camera crew, clearly preparing to shoot. They had found her. Panic bloomed behind her ribs. She locked the front door, then deadbolted, then slid the old wooden kitchen chair under the knob like she'd seen people do in movies. Her breath came fast now, uneven. The phone vibrated again. Blocked number. 1 new message. She tapped it open with her thumb. It wasn't a friend. Not a reporter. The message read, "Stay down next time, girl. You won't get another warning." Mira dropped the phone. Her knees buckled, but she caught herself against the counter. Her chest burned, heart thudding like a warning bell. The message played on repeat in her head, echoing louder than anything else. This wasn't just news anymore. Someone wanted her to disappear. She picked the phone back up, fingers trembling. Took a screenshot of the threat. Then another. She started to dial Cesio's number, the one his driver had forced into her phone the night before, but paused before hitting call. She hadn't wanted his help. Hadn't asked for it. But now she wasn't sure she had a choice. The door creaked open behind her and her grandmother shuffled in. She wore her thick housecoat and held a chipped mug of chamomile tea in both hands. "Mira, what is happening?" she asked softly. Mira turned, trying to hold herself together. "It's nothing, abuela. Just, some people got excited. It'll pass." Her grandmother's eyes were sharp despite her age. "There are cameras outside our home. That is not nothing." Mira sat at the table slowly, her hands gripping the edge. "I was on a delivery last night. I heard a baby crying, and I stopped." She couldn't bring herself to explain the rest, not the van, not the man with the scar, not the child that wasn't hers. Someone recorded it. Her grandmother was silent for a moment, then placed the tea down in front of her. "You saved a child," she said simply. "God sees that." Mira looked away, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Yeah, well, not everyone seems to agree." She showed her the message. The one with the threat. Her grandmother read it, and her lips thinned to a sharp, hard line. She didn't say a word, just crossed herself and reached for the old landline phone on the wall. Mira's eyes widened. No, don't call the police. Not yet. Why not? Because, Mira exhaled. Because the police can't protect me from this. But maybe he can. Her grandmother didn't ask who she meant. She'd lived long enough to read between the lines. Instead, she nodded once. Then you call him now. Mira took her phone back, stared at the number. Cesio Fallaci. Everything in her rebelled at the idea of calling him. But the weight of the message on her screen and the reporters outside her window told her this wasn't her world anymore. Not entirely. She tapped the call button. It rang once. Then twice. A voice answered, not Cesio's, but the silver-haired man who'd driven her home. This is Dante. Mira took a breath. It's me. Mira. There was a pause. We saw the broadcasts. We've been monitoring. Her voice cracked. They know where I live. They sent a message. Said I wouldn't get another warning. Silence on the other end. Then, finally, we're already outside. Mira's eyes widened. She rushed to the window. And sure enough, 2 black SUVs she hadn't noticed before were parked across the street, tucked neatly between other cars. The reporters hadn't even paid attention to them. We'll clear the media, Dante continued. Be ready in 5 minutes. I'm not leaving my grandmother. Understood. She'll come too. Mr. Fallaci made that very clear. Mira hung up, heart still galloping. She turned to her grandmother, who was already packing her pillbox and rosary into her purse. They're taking us somewhere safe, Mira said softly. Her grandmother simply replied, good. 5 minutes later, the knock came 3 times, firm but not rushed. When Mira opened the door, 2 men in suits stood there, one nodding, the other already scanning the hallway behind her. Outside, the reporters were being corralled and blocked from the entrance by 2 more men in dark jackets with earpieces. One tried to shout a question, but was cut off by the soft hiss of a black car window sliding closed. Mira stepped into the sunlight for the first time that morning, feeling like she had just crossed into another life. Cameras flashed, but no one got close. The men shielded her body with silent precision, guiding her and her grandmother into the SUV like they'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. As the car pulled away, Mira finally leaned back and let herself exhale. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't know how far this would spiral. But for the first time, she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't invisible anymore. And that terrified her more than anything. If you were Mira alone, threatened, and suddenly famous, would you accept protection from someone like Cesio Fallaci, or try to face it all alone? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss it, because things for Mira? They're only going to get darker from here. The bell above the door jingled as Mira stepped back into the bakery. The familiar scent of warm dough and cinnamon hit her like a wave, almost enough to quiet the chaos still buzzing in her chest. She kept her eyes down, helmet tucked under one arm, apron folded in her bag. Everything looked the same. Mrs. Russo in her corner seat with her crossword, Angelo slicing loaves with the focus of a monk. But Mira knew she wasn't the same anymore. The staff didn't say anything, but she could feel their eyes. They'd seen the footage. They'd read the headlines. Her name had been splashed across news tickers for 3 days straight. Some people whispered, hero. Others said, reckless. Either way, she wasn't just Mira the delivery girl anymore. She clocked in quietly and tied her apron on. The register beeped like it always did. She restocked the biscotti bins, wiped down the front counter, and tried not to look up at the people pointing at her from outside the window. A few even snapped photos. Her hands were steady, but only because she forced them to be. She refused to let the fear win. She refused to act like she wasn't supposed to be here. The day dragged on, every hour feeling like 2. Customers filtered in, some smiling in recognition, others awkwardly avoiding eye contact. Her coworkers stopped asking questions after the 2nd hour, too scared or too polite to push. Mira kept herself busy until the shift change. She needed this, she told herself. Not for the paycheck, but for the routine. Normalcy was its own kind of therapy. When her lunch break rolled around, She stepped out the back door and sat on the curb behind the bakery. Her sandwich sat untouched in the wax paper. Across the alley, her bike leaned against the wall where she always left it, chained to a rusted pipe. Except now, something was off. Her stomach dropped. Someone had slashed the tires. Both of them, deflated and curling inward like wounded limbs. She stood slowly, heart thudding, and walked toward it. Red spray paint stretched across the frame, a single word scrawled in jagged capital letters, "Stay down." Her breath caught in her throat. The sandwich dropped from her hands. "Hey," Angelo called from the door. "Everything okay?" Then he saw it. "Jesus," he muttered, stepping closer. "Was this here earlier?" Mira shook her head. No, her voice came out tight, strangled. It wasn't. He opened his mouth to say something else, but the back door flew open again, hard enough to rattle its hinges. Cesio Fallaci walked through it like he owned the ground beneath his feet. Black wool coat, dark eyes, scar catching the edge of the sunlight. His presence sucked the air out of the alley. Mira stiffened, but didn't move. Cesio's eyes went straight to the vandalized bike. He stared at the message like it was a challenge. Angelo backed up instinctively, mumbling, I'll go check the bread. Then they were alone. Cesio's jaw clenched as he turned to face her. "This is what you call staying safe?" "I didn't ask for your help," Mira said, straightening. "You didn't have to. They're just trying to scare me. It's working. I came back to work because I need to live my life." Cesio took a step forward. "And what happens when the next message isn't on your bike? What happens when it's your window? Your abuela?" Mira's spine went rigid. "Leave her out of this." "You think they will?" The words hit like a slap. She looked away, blinking hard. "You don't get to tell me how to live." "No," he said quietly, "but I do get to protect what's mine." Her eyes snapped back to him. "I'm not yours." His expression didn't change. "You are now. Because they've made you one of mine." Mira stared at him, heat rising in her cheeks. "I didn't ask for that. No one asks to be dragged into a war, Mira. But that doesn't mean they get to walk away from it." For a long moment, they just stood there, the silence thick between them. Then Cesio turned to one of the black SUVs parked across the alley. He didn't have to say anything. A man in a dark jacket stepped out immediately and approached. "Her bike is finished," Cesio said. "Replace it. And sweep the alley, see if we have eyes watching." The man nodded and got to work. Cesio looked at Mira again. "I respect your independence. But you're under protection whether you like it or not." Mira exhaled slowly. "I don't want to owe you anything." "You don't." "Yes, I do. I already do." Cesio's gaze softened, just barely. "You saved my son. There's no debt that equals that. I need to breathe. To feel normal." "I'll give you space," he said. "But I won't give you silence." She didn't respond, not right away. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't circle back to the same impossible truth. Her life wasn't hers anymore. The second she stepped into that alley, it had changed. She saved a baby, but lost her anonymity. And now she was a mark. That night, Mira returned home on foot, her ruined bike now loaded into the SUV. Her grandmother was waiting at the door, worry lining every crease of her face. Mira tried to smile, tried to pretend like it had just been a long day. But when she saw the shattered flower pot on their front porch, the one that used to hold the rosemary, her face fell. Another message. Another warning. They were everywhere now. She didn't tell her grandmother what it meant. She just swept up the soil, picked up the pieces, and tucked the cracked ceramic into the trash bin like it didn't scare her. But it did. Every hour that passed without another knock, another message, another threat, felt like the inhale before a scream. She lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. Cesio's words echoed louder than any threat. "You are now. Because they've made you one of mine." Mira didn't know what being one of his really meant. But something told her she was about to find out. Mira Torres wasn't supposed to be working. Not after everything. Not with bodyguards still shadowing her street like ghosts. But when the bakery manager called, short-staffed and desperate, Mira had said yes before she could second-guess it. Just a few deliveries, she told herself. One last shift to feel normal. She kept her head down as she packed the orders into insulated bags. The smells of garlic knots and pepperoni pizza were comforting, familiar. She didn't wear her old Prism Logistics jacket anymore. Too many people recognized it, but the bakery apron felt safe. Dante had raised an eyebrow when she mentioned going in, but eventually relented. "We'll follow you," he'd said flatly. "But you don't leave our line of sight." They meant it too. Two black SUVs idled across the street the entire morning, their tinted windows unreadable. At least 3 of Cesio's men rotated on foot. Mira had stopped asking their names. They were just shadows now, part of her world. She was loading her 6th delivery into the scooter's side box when the ticket came through. A warehouse address. Out near the river. She hesitated, fingers frozen on the receipt. Industrial district. Far from the residential loop. Too far. "You want me to take this one?" Angelo asked, watching her. She shook her head. "No. I got it." The lie tasted thin. But something about doing this herself felt important, like she was reclaiming a piece of her old life one street at a time. She strapped on her helmet, zipped up her jacket, and glanced toward the SUV. Dante, in the passenger seat, nodded once. A signal, "We're with you." The ride out was uneventful. Wind in her face, sun overhead, the familiar rumble of her scooter beneath her. It felt good free, almost. The warehouse was bigger than expected, steel walls weathered with rust, a red delivery door at the far end. No signs. No people. She slowed. Checked the address twice. It matched. Still, something in her gut twisted the moment her boots hit the gravel. Mira killed the engine, slid off the scooter, and reached for the pizza box. Then she heard it. Tires. Fast. A white van skidded into view around the corner of the lot, its side door already sliding open. 4 men jumped out, faces covered, guns drawn. Mira's body locked up before instinct kicked in. She ran. A voice shouted, "Grab her." She didn't scream. There was no time. 1 man lunged. She ducked behind the edge of a shipping container, heart racing, legs already aching. They were surrounding her. Then gunfire. Crack. 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 Bullets sparked off the metal edge above her head. Mira flinched, flattened herself against the steel wall. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Then more shouts, this time from another direction. Cesio's men had arrived. She heard their voices over the chaos. Target left side. Cover the door. Mira peeked out in time to see one of the masked men tackled to the ground. 2 others fired back wildly before disappearing around the rear of the warehouse. One tried to grab her again, but a shot tore through his shoulder, sending him screaming to the ground. Someone pulled her back roughly. Not one of them. "Stay down," a familiar voice barked. It was Marcus, one of Cesio's drivers. His arm was tight around her shoulders as he dragged her to cover behind a stack of pallets. "Don't move until I say." She couldn't even nod. The world was ringing. Then, through the haze of bullets and smoke, she saw him. Cesio. Emerging from the SUV that had just arrived, coat whipping behind him, gun drawn. His face unreadable. Scar catching the light. Cold, focused, lethal. He moved like he'd done this before. Like he lived for this. Mira watched as he fired once, clean shot, dropping a man trying to scale the fence. Another stepped out from the van's far side, knife in hand. Cesio didn't blink. Another shot. Silence. Then it was over. The last of the masked men fell or fled. Cesio turned to Mira, his chest rising and falling beneath the open buttons of his shirt. His gun lowered. Their eyes locked. And for the first time, Mira broke. The sob tore through her chest before she could stop it. She fell forward, knees buckling, hands shaking uncontrollably. Cesio crossed the distance in 3 strides, catching her before she hit the ground. He said nothing, just held her. Her fingers clutched at his shirt like a lifeline. She couldn't stop crying. She gasped, "I thought it was over." He wrapped both arms around her, pulling her in tighter. His voice was low, steady, meant only for her. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered. "Not while I'm breathing." Mira pressed her face into his chest, the scent of gunpowder and cologne grounding her. Her legs refused to support her weight. Her heart thundered in her ears. But for the first time in days, she didn't feel like she was falling. She felt held, protected, alive. Cesio didn't let go until the medics arrived. Even then, he helped her stand, one hand firm on her lower back. "Check her for shock," he ordered. "And tell Dante we're moving her today." Mira didn't argue. She couldn't. The warehouse had been a trap. Her face had been bait. They were still coming. They weren't done. But neither was Cesio. As she was led to the back of the SUV, Mira glanced over her shoulder. The van, the guns, the blood, it all blurred into one terrifying smear of memory. But Cesio remained clear. Standing in the sun, weapon holstered, eyes scanning the perimeter like a sentinel. He wasn't leaving her. Not now. Not ever. If someone like Cesio risked everything to protect you, power, reputation, even blood, could you ever walk away? Or would loyalty demand something in return? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to follow Mira's journey, because after this ambush, her choices won't just affect her, they'll change everything. Cesio didn't wait for the dust to settle. Within hours of the warehouse ambush, he initiated a campaign that would send a message through every criminal corridor from Newark to Chicago. The Petrocellis had made it personal, now he made it surgical. Offshore accounts were frozen through a legal loophole only a retired judge on Cesio's payroll could navigate. 3 of the Petrocelli shipping containers vanished overnight, rerouted by port workers who suddenly forgot their jobs. At dawn, a fake whistleblower dossier landed on a federal agent's desk. Inside, internal invoices, payoff records, and wiretap transcripts implicating Petrocelli shell companies in construction fraud, drug trafficking, and bribery. By noon, subpoenas were flying. Half a dozen of Antonio Petrocelli's top lieutenants were already deleting files they didn't realize Cesio had backed up twice. Phones buzzed across the city, low-level players scrambling to decide whether to run or flip. And all the while, Cesio stayed quiet. He let fear do the talking. Meanwhile, Mira and her grandmother were moved without ceremony to a high-rise penthouse overlooking the Hudson. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble floors, and a kitchen that looked like a magazine spread, none of it felt real. Mira hadn't even packed her things. Cesio's men had handled everything. When she walked in, her grandmother whispered a prayer and crossed herself, touching the smooth glass windows like they were made of stained light. The guards stood just out of sight, armed but silent. "This isn't a home," Mira had said on the first night, voice low. Her grandmother looked at her from across the massive living room. "Then make it one," she replied, calmly sipping tea. "For now, this is where you are." Mira didn't argue, but something in her chest twisted like thread pulling too tight. She stood at the window for a long time that night, trying to see her old life somewhere in the glow of the streets below. It was gone, buried under threats and headlines and gunfire. Dante and Marcus rotated security details every 12 hours. Mira learned to memorize their expressions, Dante's ever-watchful stillness, Marcus's quiet humor. A private physician came every other day to check on her grandmother. Groceries were delivered, the doorman briefed, elevator access coded. She hadn't stepped outside in 4 days. Then Cesio showed up. No warning. No guards crowding behind him. Just the quiet click of the penthouse door and the sound of his coat rustling as he walked in. Mira was curled on the couch with a blanket, watching a rerun of a cooking show she wasn't really absorbing. She sat up instantly when she saw him. "You shouldn't be here," she said before she could stop herself. Cesio's expression was unreadable, but his tone was gentle. "This place has better locks than my estate. You're safer than I am." She stood, folding the blanket over the armrest. "That's not what I meant." "I know." He looked around slowly, eyes drifting over the paintings, the still-packed moving boxes in the hallway, the untouched kitchen. "Are you eating?" he asked. "I'm not starving." He raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Instead, he stepped onto the terrace and looked out at the skyline like he was reading it for changes. Mira followed reluctantly, folding her arms as the wind tugged at her sleeves. They tried to take me, she said, voice quiet. They failed. They'll try again. Not if I burn everything they've built to the ground. His voice was calm. Too calm. Mira turned to face him, the lights of the city reflecting in her eyes. You're really doing it, aren't you? Cesio looked at her, something quiet flickering in his gaze. I already started. He paused, watching her carefully. And I won't stop until they have nothing left to hide behind. Mira stared down at the streetlights, hundreds of feet below. So what happens to me when this war ends? When you win? Cesio leaned on the railing, his posture loose, his tone softer than she'd ever heard. That depends. On what? On whether you still want to disappear when it's over. Mira looked away. She didn't answer. Later, he asked if he could stay for coffee. It was such a strange question, mundane, almost absurd after all the blood and chaos. But Mira nodded, and they sat at the kitchen island while her grandmother brewed a small pot and served it with shortbread biscuits wrapped in a linen napkin. Cesio took his coffee black. Mira, 2 sugars. Neither of them said much, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was something else. After her grandmother excused herself to rest, Cesio lingered. The mask he usually wore, composure, command, calculation, slipped just slightly. He set his coffee down and leaned forward on his elbows. I had a sister once, he said suddenly. Elena. Mira blinked. I didn't know that. No one does. We keep our pain hidden in this life. Or it gets used against us. He looked away. She was younger. Wild. Too kind for this world. She died when I was 20. I'm sorry. I should have protected her. I didn't. I built everything I have now on the promise that no one under my watch would end up like her. The words hung between them. Heavy. Sharp. Honest. Mira stared at him for a long time, reading between every word. Is that why you keep saving me? His eyes met hers. No, he said. I save you because I want to. But maybe I keep showing up because you remind me of her. You have that same fire in your blood. The kind that makes people underestimate you until it's too late. Mira didn't know what to say. Her throat was suddenly too tight. Cesio stood again, gathering himself like he was putting armor back on. You don't belong in my world, he said, voice low. But you might be the only good thing in it. Then he left without waiting for her reply. Mira sat alone in the kitchen long after the door clicked shut. The coffee had gone cold. But her hands were still warm where they had wrapped around the cup, still trembling slightly from words she never expected him to say. She didn't know what Cesio Fallaci wanted from her in the long run. Power? Redemption? Maybe nothing at all. But tonight, she knew one thing. For the first time since this all began, she didn't feel like a pawn. She felt seen. And that terrified her just as much as it comforted her. The sky was overcast the morning Cesio held the press conference. Clouds hovered like they were waiting to bear witness, thick and pale above the private estate just outside Newark where reporters had been gathering since dawn. Security was tight, cameras checked, phones scanned, journalists ushered into rows of white folding chairs placed in perfect formation on the garden lawn. No one knew exactly what was coming, but speculation was everywhere. Rumors swirled online. A truce between families, a legal announcement, even a wedding. No one guessed the truth. Mira stood in front of the full-length mirror in the guest suite of the estate, hands shaking slightly as she fastened the buttons on her blouse. It wasn't designer, but it was crisp. Understated. White with pale blue trim. The kind of thing someone respectable would wear in front of the world, even if, deep down, she still felt like a delivery girl caught in the middle of a crime story gone viral. She smoothed her skirt and tried to breathe. In the reflection behind her, Cesio appeared. He didn't knock. Just stepped in like he had the right, like he'd been watching and knew exactly the moment she needed someone steady. Are you ready? He asked. No. His expression softened. Good. That means you'll be honest. He offered his arm. Mira hesitated for only a second before taking it. Outside, the cameras were already rolling. The second they stepped onto the back patio, a wave of flashes erupted. Reporters leaned forward in their seats, mouths parted. Mira could feel every eye on her, scanning her face, her posture, her clothes. But she kept walking, matching Cesio's pace, spine straight even though her knees felt like glass. When they reached the podium, Cesio stepped up first. He didn't have notes. He didn't need them. The crowd silenced the second he raised one hand. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice carrying easily over the hum of microphones. "You all know why you're here, or at least, you think you do." There was a murmur of unease. Cesio's expression didn't change. "3 weeks ago, my son was taken from his security detail in an organized attack. What happened next didn't come from power, or money, or vengeance. It came from her." He turned toward Mira. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know who I was. All she knew was that a child was in danger, and she risked everything to stop it. He paused. "Her name is Mira Torres." The crowd reacted immediately. Gasps. Whispers. A few people dropped their phones, scrambling to take video. Mira kept her chin up, even as her pulse thundered in her ears. Cesio wasn't finished. She asked for nothing. Not protection. Not recognition. Not reward. His voice hardened. "But I will not allow courage like that to go unacknowledged. In this world, silence protects the wrong people. I will not be silent." He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. He handed it to Mira without fanfare. "This is the deed to a house," he said, turning back to the press. 3 bedrooms. Fully furnished. Located in a quiet, protected neighborhood with a garden her grandmother can plant tomatoes in, and a porch where Mira can drink coffee in peace. More murmurs. "And this," he nodded to the second envelope placed beside the first, "is the foundation contract for Romero Delivery Company. Her own business. 6 employees. Full ownership. It will carry her name and her legacy." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the cameras paused. Cesio looked over the crowd like he was issuing a verdict. "Let it be known," he said slowly, "anyone who touches her, touches me." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Across town, in a building that once housed one of the Petrocelli's favorite clubs, Antonio watched the broadcast with a glass of bourbon in his hand. His jaw clenched with every word Cesio spoke. Mira Torres, the girl who should have been dead in that alley, was now untouchable. Protected. Elevated. A face the city would remember long after this war ended. "She's not just under his wing," Antonio growled. "He's making her a symbol." His nephew, Marco, looked up from the tablet where news feeds rolled in real time. "Public sentiment's shifting," he muttered. "People are calling her the delivery angel. Some want her to run for city council." Antonio smashed the glass against the wall. Across every screen in the country, the image was the same. Cesio Fallaci standing beside Mira Torres, hand on her shoulder, both of them surrounded by security, press, and power. She didn't look like a girl anymore. She looked like something more. Like someone who couldn't be moved. The city was stunned. Social media exploded within minutes. Hashtags trended across platforms. Hashtag Mira the Brave. Hashtag Fallaci Promise. Hashtag From Bags to Boss. Bloggers wrote essays about selfless courage. Political analysts debated the implications of Cesio's speech, while influencers rushed to post their hot takes. But none of that mattered to Mira. Inside the estate, after the press was ushered out, she sat quietly in a guest room staring at the deed in her hands. Her name printed in clean, block letters. The house was real. The business was real. And none of this felt like her life anymore. Cesio entered again, slower this time. He sat across from her and didn't speak right away. She set the deed down, eyes not meeting his. "Why did you do that?" she asked quietly. "Because the world needed to know." "Know what?" "That you're not to be used. Or threatened. Or forgotten." Mira swallowed hard. "You gave me a throne," she said. "But I didn't ask to rule anything." "You're not ruling," Cesio said. "You're reclaiming what they tried to erase." He stood again, moving to the door. Just before leaving, he looked back. "This war isn't over. But now they know if they come for you again, they won't just be facing me. They'll be facing the city that now sees you for who you really are." When he was gone, Mira sat in silence. Then she opened the envelope again and stared at the name printed on the company document. Romero Delivery Company. Her name and her grandmother's combined. For the first time, it wasn't just about survival. It was about building something. And no matter what came next, Mira knew this much. She was no longer just the girl who fought in the alley. She was a symbol now. And Cesio had made sure the world would never forget it. The end came not with sirens, but silence. Antonio Petrocelli's empire didn't crumble in a gunfight or blaze of vengeance. It unraveled like thread pulled tight, quietly, methodically, until it snapped under the weight of betrayal. Every call he made in those final days went unanswered. Every ally he counted on had already sold him out. And Cesio never lifted a weapon to make it happen. He didn't need to. The strikes had been planned weeks in advance, documents delivered to federal prosecutors through backdoor channels, timed bank account freezes, wiretapped recordings sent in anonymous envelopes. Cesio fed the system exactly what it needed to consume itself. The FBI had everything: tax fraud, racketeering, bribery, murder for hire. When the agents arrived, they weren't kicking down doors. They were shaking hands with prearranged informants. At 7:32 a.m., Antonio was arrested in his silk robe with a half-drunk bourbon still in his hand. His lawyer wasn't even surprised. 2 of his captains had already flipped in exchange for leniency, leading agents to storage units filled with ledgers, money laundering trails, and enough illegal assets to bury a dozen lifetimes. As he was escorted down his marble staircase in handcuffs, Antonio didn't scream. He didn't protest. He just stared out the window, toward the skyline where Fallaci's name now burned brighter than his. Back at the penthouse, Mira stirred her coffee in silence. The television played footage from the courthouse, Antonio being led out, agents carrying boxes of evidence, headlines scrolling across the bottom of the screen. New Jersey crime syndicate collapses in federal sting. Petrocelli family dismantled in record time. Mira watched, numb, her thoughts unreadable. Her grandmother folded laundry on the couch behind her. Is it really over? Mira asked aloud, though she wasn't sure who she was asking. Dante answered from the hallway. He had been standing there for a while, suit pressed, hands clasped in front of him like always. It's over, he said, voice firm. He's done. Mira set the spoon down gently. She didn't smile, didn't cry, just exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath for too long. Across the room, her grandmother crossed herself and muttered something in Spanish Mira didn't catch. Then she picked up the folded towels and left the room, giving them space. Dante stepped forward and placed a phone on the table. There's one more thing, he said. Mr. Fallaci wants to speak with you. Mira picked up the phone. Cesio's voice came through immediately. It's done. I saw. He won't hurt anyone again. Mira paused. But they're still out there. They are, Cesio admitted. But not with the same power. The Petrocellis ruled with silence and fear. Now every one of their secrets is on record, and every rival knows what happens when they cross the wrong lines. Mira looked down at her hands. So what now? Now, we build something better. Later that evening, Cesio came in person. No press. No announcements. Just him and Dante, and a bottle of dark red wine Mira didn't even know she owned. They sat on the rooftop terrace of the penthouse, the city lights glowing below them like a map of stars. Mira didn't say much at first. Cesio poured the wine without asking. I used to think survival was enough, he said. That protecting what I built meant winning. Mira looked at him quiet. But then you came along, he continued. And I realized something. What's that? You didn't just change my life, Mira, Cesio said, glass in hand, voice steady. You changed the city. Mira's eyes stung, but she blinked fast. I didn't mean to. The people who change things the most never do. They sat in silence for a while after that. The sound of traffic 4 stories below. The wind brushing past like a whisper. Cesio looked up toward the horizon. Mira followed his gaze. Somewhere beyond the buildings was the house he'd promised her, the delivery company already up and running in her name. You should know, he said, softer now, your protection isn't ending. Mira tilted her head. Even now? Yes. I thought you said it was over. It is. For them. His voice hardened again. But not for people like you. People who don't understand how many enemies they made by simply surviving. Mira didn't argue. She just nodded once, slowly. She had lived through death threats, stalking, betrayal, and bullets. She had watched an entire criminal empire implode because she chose not to walk away from a crying child. And now she was something else entirely. A name whispered in respect. A face burned into headlines. A life no longer lived in the shadows. Later that night, she sat at the edge of her bed, reading the delivery schedules for Mira Delivery Company. Her name printed at the top. Her drivers. Her routes. Her business. And outside her window, the city kept moving. But not like before. Something had shifted. She didn't just survive the fire. She'd become the reason it ended. If you were Mira, offered peace but haunted by a world you changed forever, would you try to walk away or finally embrace the power you never asked for? Let us know in the comments, and if you're following Mira's rise, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Some wars may be over, but stories like hers? They never stay quiet for long. The new house was small, but it had windows that let the sun in. It sat on a quiet street just west of Hoboken, with a front porch wrapped in ivy and enough space for her grandmother's tomato plants to take root. The walls were painted warm tones, soft yellows, and calming grays. The refrigerator hummed quietly, the cupboards were already stocked, and the key rested on Mira's own ring like it had always been there. For the first time in months, she didn't look over her shoulder every time a car slowed down on her street. This was peace. Mira Delivery Company opened its doors 2 weeks after the final Petrocelli arrest. The logo, her name, stylized with a winged package over the R, shined proudly on the front window and the 3 vans parked out back. Her first hires were familiar faces: Angelo from the bakery, Teresa from her old delivery route, even Luis, her high school friend who'd been out of work for 6 months. They didn't ask questions. Just rolled up their sleeves and said, "Where do you need me?" And Mira answered with a clipboard, a smile, and quiet confidence. She worked every day, even when she didn't have to. Helped load crates, trained new drivers, double-checked receipts and route times. The business was small, but solid and, for the first time, entirely hers. Customers who recognized her face from the news left big tips and thank you notes. Sometimes, little girls asked to take pictures with her. One even brought her a handmade card that said, "Thank you for being brave." Mira had to excuse herself to the office to cry. Cesio came less frequently now. He was still around, still watching, still protecting, but from a distance that gave her space. He sent updates through Dante, sometimes through Marcus. When he did show up, it was never for long. A 5-minute visit to drop off paperwork. A silent check-in from the SUV before driving off again. But Mira always felt him watching. Always knew he was near. It was strange how his absence didn't feel like abandonment, just patience. As if he trusted her enough now to stand on her own. As if he was waiting for her to realize something on her own timeline. And she was starting to. One late Thursday afternoon, just as the sun slipped behind the city skyline, Mira returned home from the warehouse to find a familiar black SUV parked at the curb. The passenger door opened before she reached the porch. Cesio stepped out first. Alessio followed, was carried, chubby arms stretched toward the sky, cheeks rosy, legs kicking with joy. He was nearly walking now, babbling nonstop. His laugh echoed across the lawn like it belonged there. The moment he saw Mira, he squealed. His little arm shot out toward her with a noise that sounded suspiciously like me. Mira dropped her bag on the step and met them halfway. Cesio handed the baby over without a word, and Alessio immediately wrapped his fingers in Mira's hair and rested his forehead against hers. Her heart swelled so fast it made her dizzy. "He remembers me," she whispered. Cesio nodded once. "Of course he does." They stood like that for a while, just the 3 of them, a strange kind of stillness settling over them like a blanket. Mira rocked Alessio gently in her arms, the weight of him grounding her. Cesio watched with a softness she had only glimpsed once or twice before. The scar above his eye was almost hidden in the shadow of dusk, and without it, he looked like someone else entirely. "I brought something," he said eventually, reaching into his coat. She raised an eyebrow. "Another deed? Another envelope?" "No." He pulled out a small silver key. Held it out between two fingers. Mira looked at it, not taking it just yet. "What is it?" "A key," he said, "to my home. Not the estate. My home." She hesitated. "Why?" "Because I want you to have it." She looked up at him, confused. "I don't need a safe house anymore, Cesio." "This isn't for safety," he said softly. "This is for something else." He stepped a little closer. His voice dropped. "You kept my son alive. You faced down men who would have killed you without blinking. You lost your normal life, your job, your peace, and still, you never asked for anything." He paused. "You gave me back the only thing that mattered to me." Mira's throat tightened. Cesio's eyes didn't leave hers. "He's safe because of you," he said quietly. "And, maybe, so am I." The silence after that was thick and charged. Mira looked down at the baby in her arms, then back at the man in front of her, the man she once feared, now the one she trusted more than anyone. She reached out slowly, took the key. It felt heavier than it looked. She didn't know what it meant. Not exactly. But it felt like the beginning of something she hadn't dared imagine. They didn't say much else that evening. Cesio stayed for dinner, seated across from Mira at the modest kitchen table her grandmother had already claimed as her domain. Alessio sat in his lap, babbling between bites of steamed vegetables and bits of chicken cutlet. Mira's grandmother told stories from her youth in Havana, and Cesio, shockingly, laughed. Not a cold, reserved chuckle, but a real, unguarded laugh. Mira caught herself staring. And Cesio caught her staring, too. But neither of them looked away. Later that night, after the dishes were washed and the baby had fallen asleep on Cesio's shoulder, he rose to leave. He didn't ask her to come with him. Didn't demand anything. Just touched her hand as he passed and said, "Call me, if you want to use that key." She didn't answer with words. Just closed her fingers around the key in her pocket and nodded. As the SUV disappeared down the block, Mira stood on the porch with her arms folded against the night breeze. Above her, the stars were just beginning to peek through the haze of the city. Behind her, her grandmother's quiet hum floated in from the kitchen window. In her pocket, the key stayed warm in her palm. She didn't know what came next. But for the first time, she was starting to want more than just survival. Some mornings, Mira still woke before sunrise. Not because of fear, those days were behind her, but because routine was in her bones now. The hum of the espresso machine, the shuffle of delivery schedules, the early chatter of her drivers, it grounded her. Romera Delivery Company ran like clockwork, growing faster than she imagined, with regular clients and even a glowing write-up in a local paper titled, "From Survivor to CEO." She framed it and hung it in the front office, not for pride, but to remind herself how far she'd come. And how close she'd come to losing everything. Her grandmother had settled into the new house beautifully. The backyard overflowed with herbs and tomatoes, and she now insisted on cooking for the staff every Friday, even if it meant ignoring her physical therapist. Mira let her, because it made her happy, and because there were fewer things in this life that brought peace like the smell of simmering sofrito in the kitchen. The home Cesio gave them no longer felt like a gift, it felt like it belonged to them now. Lived in. Earned. Every photo on the wall told a story they survived. On Sundays, Mira didn't work. She took long walks through her neighborhood with a coffee in hand, listening to the city breathe like it trusted her now. Sometimes, neighbors stopped her just to say thank you, never mentioning names, just nodding with quiet respect. Kids waved when her delivery vans passed their school. And she finally stopped flinching when someone called her name in public. She wasn't running anymore. This Sunday, the house was unusually quiet. The front door had been left slightly ajar, but there was no tension in the air, just stillness. Mira stepped inside, removed her shoes, and headed toward the back nursery. The door was cracked. Warm afternoon light spilled through. She pushed it open slowly. Inside, Alessio lay curled against a pillow on the nursery daybed. Chubby fingers tangled in the blanket, his mouth parted in soft sleep. His cheeks were rosy from laughter, and one tiny shoe had fallen to the floor beside a stuffed giraffe. Mira stepped in without a sound and sat gently on the edge of the bed. Her fingers brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. He looked safe. More than that, he looked loved. Behind her, a shadow moved in the doorway. Cesio stood there, leaning quietly against the frame, arms folded, coat unbuttoned. He didn't speak. Just watched the moment unfold like it was something sacred. Mira didn't look up right away. She didn't need to. She knew he was watching because he always was. Not out of control, but care. "Did he fall asleep on you again?" she asked softly, still watching Alessio breathe. Cesio smiled, just enough to make her heart skip. "He wouldn't stop talking," he said. Then he just dropped. Mira chuckled. "He's growing fast. So are you." She finally looked at him then. He wasn't just the man with the scar anymore. He was something gentler, more human. She could see it in his eyes when he looked at his son, or at her. The war had ended. But something stronger had taken its place. Cesio walked into the room and crouched beside the daybed. His hand rested lightly on Alessio's back, grounding both of them. "He sleeps better here," he said. "I don't know why. Maybe because here doesn't feel like a fortress," Mira whispered. "Maybe here feels like home." They sat like that for a while, no need to speak, no fear of silence. Eventually, Mira broke it. "I didn't save a mafia boss's son," she said, voice low. "I saved a child." And that one choice changed everything. Cesio looked at her for a long time, his face unreadable. Then he nodded slowly. "You changed more than you realize." Later that night, after Cesio left with Alessio swaddled in his arms, Mira stood on the porch under the soft glow of the front light. She could hear the city winding down, the slow hum of traffic, the rustle of wind through trees, the life of a place that had come to know her name. Her name, once anonymous, now carried weight. Not because of fame, but because of choice. She stepped down to the sidewalk, looking out at the quiet neighborhood. Somewhere far from here, someone might still whisper her name like a warning. Or a legend. But Mira Torres knew the truth. She was just a girl on a bike who couldn't walk away from a cry in the dark. And, because of that one moment, lives were changed. Empires fell. A child was saved. A city shifted. She smiled to herself, stepped back inside, and closed the door behind her. "I thought I was just a girl on a bike. But now, the city will never forget my name." Thank you for listening to this story until the very end. There's another interesting one on your left screen that I think you'll really enjoy.